Lisa Martinez pushed open the heavy glass door of Mountain View Martial Arts Academy and stepped inside. The smell of sweat and rubber mats filled her nose. She looked around the large room with its bright lights and mirrors covering one entire wall. Students in white uniforms moved across the wooden floor, practicing kicks and punches. It was 7 o'clock on a Tuesday evening. Lisa had picked this time on purpose because she thought fewer people would be there. She wore old gray sweatpants that were too big for her and a faded blue t-shirt. Her long brown hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. At 34 years old, she looked like any other mom from the neighborhood who wanted to try something new. The receptionist, a young woman with a friendly smile, looked up from her desk. "Can I help you?" "I want to sign up for karate classes," Lisa said quietly. "Just the beginner ones, nothing too serious." "Sure, let me get you the forms." The receptionist handed her a clipboard with papers to fill out. "Are you looking for fitness or self-defense?" Lisa thought for a moment. "Both, I guess, but mostly just some light exercise. I heard martial arts can help with stress too." While Lisa filled out the forms, she watched the students training. Most of them looked young and strong. Several wore black belts around their waists. They moved with confidence and made loud sounds when they punched and kicked. It was very different from what Lisa had expected. The instructor was a tall man with short black hair and muscles that showed through his uniform. His black belt looked worn and old, which meant he had been training for many years. He shouted commands at the students, and they quickly did what he said. His name tag read Jake Morrison, head instructor. "That's Sensei Morrison," the receptionist explained when she saw Lisa looking. "He's been teaching here for 15 years. Really knows his stuff." Lisa nodded and continued writing on the forms. She put down her address, phone number, and emergency contact information. When it asked about previous martial arts experience, she wrote none. Two men in black belts walked past the front desk. They were both big and looked strong. The first one was very tall with blonde hair cut short like a soldier. His name tag said Kyle Bennett. The second man had dark hair and was almost as tall. His tag read Ryan Clark. They were talking and laughing about something. "Those are two of our best students," the receptionist said proudly. "Kyle has been training here for 8 years and Ryan for 6. They both teach some of the lower level classes too." Lisa handed back the completed forms and paid for her first month of classes. The receptionist gave her a schedule and explained that beginner classes were on Tuesday and Thursday evenings plus Saturday mornings. "You can start tonight if you want," she offered. "Class begins in 10 minutes. You don't need a uniform yet. Just wear what you have on." Lisa felt nervous but nodded. "Okay, should I take my shoes off?" "Yes, everyone trains barefoot. You can put your shoes in one of those cubbies over there." Lisa walked to the edge of the training area and removed her sneakers. The wooden floor felt smooth and cool under her feet. She found an empty spot near the back of the group and tried to copy what the other students were doing. They were stretching and getting ready for class. Jake Morrison clapped his hands loudly. "Line up, beginners in the back row." Lisa moved to where he pointed. There were 3 other new students near her, a teenage boy who looked excited, a woman about her own age, and an older man with gray hair. The experienced students formed neat rows in front of them. "Tonight we work on basic stances and punches," Jake announced. "Beginners, watch carefully and do your best. Everyone else set a good example." The class began with warm-up exercises. Lisa followed along as they did jumping jacks, push-ups, and stretches. She tried to stay quiet and not draw attention to herself. The other students seemed to know exactly what to do. During the stretching, she noticed Kyle and Ryan looking back at her and the other beginners. Kyle whispered something to Ryan that made him smile and shake his head. Lisa pretended not to notice. "First stance is called ready position," Jake called out. "Feet shoulder-width apart, hands at your sides, back straight." Lisa copied the instructor's position. It felt awkward at first, but she tried to make her body match what she saw. The teenage boy next to her kept fidgeting and couldn't seem to stand still. "Now we learn the horse stance," Jake continued. "Squat down like you're sitting in a chair but keep your back straight. This builds leg strength." Everyone bent their knees and lowered into the position. Lisa's legs started burning after just a few seconds. but she stayed quiet. Around her, she could hear some of the other beginners breathing hard and making small sounds of discomfort. Kyle Bennett walked behind the back row, checking everyone's form. When he got to Lisa, he stopped. "Feet wider apart," he said in a loud voice. "And squat lower. This isn't supposed to be easy." Lisa adjusted her position as he suggested. Kyle waited a moment, then moved on to correct the teenage boy. But Lisa felt his eyes on her for longer than seemed necessary. The class continued with basic punching techniques. Jake showed them how to make a proper fist and throw a straight punch. Lisa practiced the movements slowly and carefully. She tried to look like she was learning everything for the first time. "Punch with your whole body, not just your arm," Jake explained. "Turn your hips and push from your feet." Some of the advanced students paired up to practice on heavy bags hanging from the ceiling. Their punches made loud smacking sounds against the thick leather. Lisa watched them and tried to copy their movements in the air. Ryan Clark demonstrated a combination of punches for the intermediate students. His movements were fast and sharp. When he finished, several students clapped. He smiled and bowed slightly. "Nice technique, Ryan," Jake said approvingly. "That's what years of training looks like." As the class ended, everyone lined up again and bowed to the instructor. Lisa copied what the others did, though she wasn't sure why they were bowing. "Good work tonight," Jake announced. "Beginners, don't get discouraged. Everyone starts somewhere. Keep coming to class and you'll improve." Students began to leave, chatting with each other about their training. Lisa walked quietly to get her shoes. She could hear Kyle and Ryan talking near the front desk. "Did you see the new lady?" Kyle said, not bothering to lower his voice much. "She looks like she's never done anything more athletic than walking to her mailbox." Ryan laughed. "Give her 2 weeks. Most of these beginners quit once they realize it's actual work." Lisa tied her shoes and gathered her things. As she walked toward the door, the receptionist called out, "See you Thursday?" Lisa waved and stepped outside into the cool evening air. The parking lot was mostly empty now. She got into her small, blue car and sat for a moment before starting the engine. Through the window, she could see Jake, Kyle, and Ryan still talking inside the dojo. Kyle was gesturing and seemed to be telling a story that made the others laugh. Lisa started her car and drove home, thinking about what she had gotten herself into. 3 weeks had passed since Lisa first walked into Mountain View Martial Arts Academy. She came to every Tuesday and Thursday class, always wearing the same oversized clothes and keeping to herself. The other beginners who started with her had already quit. The teenage boy stopped coming after the second week, and the older man with gray hair lasted only 10 days. Lisa was now the only beginner left in her group. She still looked clumsy during the basic exercises. When Jake Morrison showed new techniques, Lisa would practice them slowly and ask simple questions. She stumbled sometimes when doing kicks and often looked confused during the more complex movements. The other students seemed to think she was trying her best but just wasn't very good at martial arts. Kyle Bennett had started paying more attention to her. During breaks between exercises, he would make comments loud enough for everyone to hear. "Some people are just natural athletes," he said one evening while Lisa struggled with a balance exercise. "And some people, well, they try hard." Ryan Clark would laugh at Kyle's comments and add his own remarks. "At least she shows up," he said. "That's more than most weekend warriors do." The comments made Lisa feel uncomfortable, but she pretended not to hear them. She focused on her practice and tried to stay out of their way. But Kyle and Ryan seemed to enjoy having someone they could pick on. During the 4th week, Jake Morrison announced that they would start practicing light contact sparring. "Everyone needs to learn how to handle a real opponent," he explained. "We'll start easy and build up slowly." Lisa felt nervous about this. Sparring meant she would have to fight against other students even if it was just practice. She had hoped to avoid this part of training. "Beginners should spar with intermediate students first," Jake continued. "They'll help you learn proper distance and timing." Kyle Bennett raised his hand. "Sensei, I can work with the new student. She needs someone experienced to show her the ropes." Jake nodded. "Good idea, Kyle. Go easy on her. Remember, this is about learning, not winning." Lisa found herself standing across from Kyle on the mat. He was much taller and heavier than her. His muscles showed through his uniform, and he had the confident look of someone who had never lost a fight. "Don't worry," Kyle said with a smile that didn't look friendly. "I'll take it easy on you." Jake called for them to begin. Kyle moved forward quickly and threw a punch toward Lisa's face. She managed to block it, but his next punch hit her shoulder harder than it should have for light contact. Lisa stepped back, surprised by how much it hurt. "You need to keep your guard up," Kyle said loudly so everyone could hear. "This isn't a dance class." He threw another combination of punches. Lisa blocked most of them, but a few got through and hit her arms and ribs. Each hit was harder than necessary for practice sparring. She could see other students watching with worried expressions. "Come on, fight back," Kyle demanded. "You can't just stand there and take it." Lisa threw a few weak punches that Kyle easily avoided. He shook his head like he was disappointed and then threw a kick that caught her in the stomach. Lisa doubled over, trying to catch her breath. "That's enough for now," Jake called out. "Switch partners." But Kyle wasn't finished. "She needs more practice, Sensei. How is she going to learn if we go easy on her?" Jake thought for a moment. "Okay, one more round, but keep it light, Kyle." The second round was worse. Kyle moved faster and hit harder. He seemed to enjoy watching Lisa struggle to defend herself. When she tried to move away, he followed her and kept attacking. By the end of the round, Lisa had red marks on her arms and was breathing hard. "Not bad for a beginner," Kyle said with fake concern. "You'll get better with practice." The next class was even worse. This time, Ryan Clark asked to spar with Lisa. He and Kyle seemed to have planned it together. "My turn to help the new student," Ryan announced. Ryan was different from Kyle, but just as mean. Where Kyle used hard, direct attacks, Ryan was sneaky. He would pretend to go easy and then suddenly hit hard when Lisa wasn't expecting it. He also grabbed her uniform and pushed her around more than was necessary. "You need to be tougher," Ryan said after knocking Lisa down for the third time. "Real attackers won't be gentle with you." Other students in the class started to notice what was happening. Lisa could see them whispering to each other and looking concerned. But nobody said anything to Jake Morrison, who seemed to think the hard training was good for Lisa. After class, Lisa overheard Kyle and Ryan talking near the changing rooms. "She's pathetic," Kyle said. "I don't know why Sensei lets her stay. She's just wasting everyone's time." "Maybe she'll quit soon," Ryan replied. "Most people like her don't last long when things get serious. We should make sure she understands what real martial arts training is like," Kyle said with a mean laugh. Lisa pretended to be looking for something in her bag while she listened. She felt angry but kept her face calm and quiet. The harassment got worse over the next few classes. Kyle and Ryan would accidentally hit too hard during drills. They made jokes about her technique in front of other students. They would pair up with her for exercises and then complain loudly about having to work with someone so inexperienced. During one particularly bad class, Jake Morrison had everyone practice throwing techniques. Students would take turns throwing each other to the mat and then helping them up. It was supposed to be gentle practice. When Kyle's turn came to throw Lisa, he grabbed her uniform roughly and threw her much harder than necessary. Lisa hit the mat with a loud thud that made several students gasp. Instead of helping her up, Kyle stood over her. "You need to learn how to fall properly," he said. "That's basic stuff." Ryan laughed from across the room. "Maybe she should take a gymnastics class first." Lisa got up slowly, pretending to be more hurt than she was. She noticed that some of the other students looked angry about what they had seen, but they stayed quiet. Kyle and Ryan were high-ranking students, and nobody wanted to challenge them. Jake Morrison seemed to think the rough treatment was helping Lisa become tougher. "Sometimes you need to push students out of their comfort zone," he told another instructor after class. "She's tougher than she looks." But Lisa could see that Kyle and Ryan were enjoying the bullying. It wasn't about making her a better martial artist. They simply liked having someone they could pick on without getting in trouble. The situation reached a new low during Lisa's 6th week at the academy. Kyle and Ryan started working together during sparring sessions, taking turns attacking her while the other one watched and made comments. "She's wide open on the left side," Ryan would call out while Kyle attacked. "Her footwork is terrible," Kyle would respond when it was Ryan's turn. They treated Lisa like she was just a practice dummy instead of a real person. Other students began to look uncomfortable during these sessions, but the intimidating presence of the two black belts kept everyone quiet. Lisa continued to take the abuse without complaining. She would go home after each class with new bruises and soreness. But she kept coming back. Kyle and Ryan began to think they could do whatever they wanted to her. They had no idea they were making a very dangerous mistake. Friday evening was usually quiet at Mountain View Martial Arts Academy. Most of the regular students came on weekdays, so Fridays were reserved for advanced classes and special training sessions. Lisa didn't know this when she walked through the front door at 7 o'clock expecting to find her usual beginner class. The dojo looked different tonight. Instead of the mixed group of students she was used to, everyone wearing a uniform had at least a brown belt. Most wore black belts, with multiple stripes showing years of serious training. The atmosphere felt more intense, more serious than her regular classes. Lisa stood near the entrance, confused. She looked around for other beginners, but didn't see any. Maybe she had gotten the schedule wrong, or maybe her regular class had been moved to a different room. Jake Morrison noticed her standing there. Instead of telling her she was in the wrong place, a strange smile crossed his face. He had been watching Kyle and Ryan pick on Lisa for weeks, and he seemed to think it was making her tougher. Tonight he saw an opportunity to really test her. "Lisa," Jake called out loudly. "Perfect timing. We're doing advanced sparring tonight. This will be good for you." Lisa felt her stomach drop. "Oh, I think I made a mistake. This looks like the advanced class. I should probably go home." "Nonsense," Jake said, waving her over. "You've been training for 6 weeks now. Time to see what you've learned. Everyone here started as a beginner once." The advanced students turned to look at Lisa. Most of them seemed surprised and concerned. They knew the difference between their skill level and what a 6-week beginner could handle. A few whispered to each other, clearly thinking this was a bad idea. Kyle Bennett's eyes lit up when he saw Lisa. This was exactly the opportunity he had been waiting for. Ryan Clark was standing next to him, and they both looked excited about what was about to happen. "Sensei's right," Kyle said loudly. "She needs to experience real martial arts training. We've been going too easy on her." Lisa wanted to leave, but Jake was already directing her to put on protective gear. She found herself strapping on headgear, gloves, and shin guards alongside students who looked like they could compete in professional tournaments. "Tonight we're doing continuous sparring," Jake announced to the class. 3-minute rounds, light to medium contact. Advanced students, remember you're working with someone new. Help her learn. But the way Jake said it and the look in his eyes suggested he wanted to see how Lisa would handle real pressure. He had bought into Kyle and Ryan's idea that Lisa needed tougher training to improve. Lisa found herself in the center of the mat facing Kyle. Around them, other advanced students formed a circle to watch. The room felt smaller suddenly, and Lisa could hear her heart beating fast. "Don't worry," Kyle said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "I'll start easy and build up slowly." Jake blew his whistle to start the round. Kyle immediately moved forward, with a speed and intensity that was nothing like their previous sparring sessions. His first punch came fast toward Lisa's face. She managed to block it, but the force knocked her backward. Kyle didn't give her time to recover. He threw a combination of punches that came from different angles. Lisa tried to defend herself, but she was clearly overwhelmed. Within 30 seconds, Kyle had landed several hits to her body and arms. "Keep your hands up," Jake shouted from the side. "Move your feet." But Kyle was moving too fast and hitting too hard for someone with only 6 weeks of training. Lisa stumbled backward, trying to create distance, but Kyle followed her. He seemed to be enjoying himself. The other students watching began to look uncomfortable. This wasn't normal training anymore. It was starting to look like Kyle was beating up someone who couldn't defend herself properly. Kyle threw a kick that caught Lisa in the ribs. She bent over, trying to catch her breath. Instead of backing off, Kyle grabbed her shoulders and shoved her against the mirrored wall. "Fight back," he yelled at her. "You can't just run away all the time." Lisa pushed off the wall and tried to create space, but Kyle was right there waiting for her. He threw another combination that knocked her backward again. This time she fell to one knee. "Get up!" Jake called out. "The round isn't over." Lisa stood up slowly. There was a small cut on her lip where one of Kyle's punches had gotten through her guard. Some of the advanced students were shaking their heads and looking at Jake like he should stop the match. "Maybe that's enough," one of the brown belts said quietly. "She's fine," Jake replied. "She needs to learn to handle pressure." Kyle heard this and seemed to take it as permission to be even more aggressive. When Lisa got back to her feet, he immediately attacked again. This time, his punches were harder and faster than before. Lisa tried to defend herself, but Kyle was too strong and too experienced. He pushed her around the mat like she was a toy. Every time she tried to move away, he cut off her escape route and forced her back against the wall. "This is pathetic," Kyle said while throwing punches. "How are you supposed to defend yourself if you can't even handle basic sparring?" The round finally ended, but Jake immediately called for another one. "Switch partners, Ryan, your turn." Ryan Clark stepped forward with the same eager expression Kyle had worn. The two friends exchanged a quick look that suggested they had planned this together. "My turn to help you improve," Ryan said to Lisa. Lisa was already tired and hurt from the first round, but Jake wouldn't let her rest. Ryan started even more aggressively than Kyle had. He seemed to think the first round had been too easy on her. Ryan's style was different but just as overwhelming. He used more kicks and grabbed Lisa's uniform to throw her around. Within the first minute, he had knocked her down twice. "Get up faster," Jake shouted. "Real attackers won't wait for you." Other students in the room began whispering to each other. Even the advanced practitioners could see that this had gone beyond normal training. Lisa was clearly overmatched, and the two black belts seemed to be enjoying hurting her. Ryan grabbed Lisa's gi roughly and pulled her close to his face. "You don't belong here," he said quietly so only she could hear. "Real martial artists don't quit when things get tough. But maybe you should." He shoved her backward hard. Lisa stumbled and almost fell again. The room had become completely quiet, except for the sound of Ryan's attacks and Lisa's heavy breathing. Kyle called out from the sideline. "She's not even trying to fight back, Ryan. Maybe she's given up already." Ryan laughed and moved in for what looked like it would be his most aggressive attack yet. He grabbed Lisa's uniform with both hands and pulled her toward him. "Time to learn what real martial arts feels like," he said with a mean smile. The other students watched in shocked silence. Even Jake Morrison seemed to realize that things had gone too far, but he hesitated to stop it now. Lisa looked up at Ryan's face, blood trickling from her cut lip. Her breathing was heavy, and her hair had come loose from its ponytail. She looked beaten and defeated, but something in her eyes had changed. For just a moment, the quiet, humble woman who had been coming to classes for 6 weeks was gone. In her place was someone else entirely. Ryan was still holding her uniform and grinning when he noticed the change. The scared look in Lisa's eyes had been replaced by something cold and dangerous. "What's wrong?" Ryan asked, his smile faltering slightly. Lisa looked at him for a long moment. Then she spoke in a voice that was completely different from the soft, timid tone everyone was used to hearing. "Let go of me," she said quietly, but it was too late. Ryan had pushed too far, and Kyle had helped him do it. They had finally found out what happened when you cornered someone who had been holding back for weeks. They were about to discover that Lisa Martinez wasn't the helpless beginner they thought she was. The change in Lisa happened so fast that Ryan didn't see it coming. One second he was holding her uniform and smiling, ready to throw her around some more. The next second, he was flying through the air. Lisa's movement was nothing like what anyone had seen from her before. She grabbed Ryan's wrists with perfect technique and twisted her body in a way that used his own grip against him. Ryan found himself launched across the mat with such force that he crashed into the heavy bag in the corner of the room. The sound of Ryan hitting the equipment was loud in the quiet dojo. Everyone stood frozen, trying to understand what had just happened. The clumsy beginner they had been watching get beaten up was gone. In her place stood someone who moved like a professional fighter. Kyle Bennett stared in shock as his friend groaned on the floor next to the heavy bag. "What the hell just happened?" he said. Lisa turned to face Kyle. Her whole body looked different now. She stood straight and balanced, her feet positioned like someone who had spent years learning how to fight. Her hands were relaxed, but ready. Most importantly, her eyes had changed completely. The scared, confused look was gone. Now she looked calm and dangerous. "Ryan," Kyle called out, but his friend was still trying to get his breath back from hitting the wall. Kyle was angry and embarrassed. He couldn't believe that the weak woman they had been picking on for weeks had just thrown his training partner across the room. It had to be luck or some kind of mistake. "You got lucky," Kyle said, moving toward Lisa. "Let's see you do that again." Kyle was bigger and stronger than Ryan, and he came at Lisa with real anger this time. He threw a hard punch aimed right at her face, putting all his weight behind it. It was the kind of punch that could seriously hurt someone. Lisa moved her head just enough to let the punch go past her face. At the same time, she stepped forward and drove her elbow into Kyle's ribs with perfect timing and technique. The sound of the impact made several students gasp. Kyle doubled over, the air knocked out of his lungs. Before he could recover, Lisa grabbed his head and brought her knee up toward his face. Kyle managed to get his hands up to block, but the power behind Lisa's knee strike sent him stumbling backward. The entire class watched in complete silence. This wasn't the same person who had been struggling with basic techniques for 6 weeks. This was someone who clearly knew how to fight at a very high level. Jake Morrison finally found his voice. "What's going on here? Lisa, how did you—" But Kyle wasn't finished. His pride was hurt more than his body, and he couldn't accept that he was being beaten by someone he had been bullying. He charged at Lisa like an angry bull, trying to tackle her to the ground. Lisa sidestepped Kyle's charge and used his own momentum against him. She grabbed his arm as he went past and applied a joint lock that sent him crashing to the mat face first. Before he could get up, she had control of his arm and was applying pressure to his elbow in a way that made Kyle cry out in pain. "Stop, stop," Kyle yelled. "You're going to break my arm." Lisa held the lock for just a moment longer, then released it and stepped back. Kyle rolled away from her, holding his arm and breathing hard. Ryan had finally gotten to his feet and was looking at Lisa like he was seeing a ghost. "Who are you?" he asked quietly. Lisa looked around the room at all the shocked faces staring at her. These people had watched her get picked on for weeks without saying anything. They had seen Kyle and Ryan bully her and hadn't tried to help. Now they wanted to know who she really was. She wiped the blood from her lip with the back of her hand and straightened her torn uniform. When she spoke, her voice was calm, but completely different from the timid tone everyone was used to hearing. "My name is Lisa Martinez," she said. "I'm a retired Army sergeant. I spent 8 years in the military, including 3 tours in Afghanistan with a Special Forces unit." The room was so quiet you could hear people breathing. Several students had their mouths open in shock. Lisa continued. "I was a hand-to-hand combat instructor. I trained soldiers how to fight and survive in close combat situations. I have black belts in 3 different martial arts, and I've been in more real fights than most of you have had sparring matches." Jake Morrison stared at her like he couldn't believe what he was hearing. "Then why did you pretend to be a beginner? Why let them treat you like that?" Lisa's expression became sad for a moment. "Because I'm tired of fighting. I came here looking for a peaceful place to practice basic forms and maybe learn to meditate. I've had enough violence for several lifetimes." She looked at Kyle and Ryan, who were both still on the floor looking up at her with fear and confusion. "I signed up for beginner classes because I wanted to start over. I wanted to learn martial arts as a way of finding peace, not as a way to hurt people. I hoped I could leave all the fighting behind me." Kyle tried to get to his feet, still holding his sore arm. "You lied to us. You made us look like fools." Lisa's eyes hardened again. "I didn't lie about anything. I am a beginner at karate. But I'm not a beginner at fighting. There's a difference." She turned to address the whole class. "I put up with your harassment because I was trying to be peaceful. I let you hurt me because I didn't want to hurt you back. But you wouldn't stop. You kept pushing and pushing until you forced me to defend myself." Ryan finally managed to stand up, though he was still shaky. "We were just trying to make you tougher. It's how martial arts training works." "No," Lisa said firmly. "What you were doing was bullying. Real martial arts training is about respect and discipline. What you two were doing was using your rank to pick on someone you thought couldn't fight back. She walked over to where her shoes were stored, moving with the fluid grace that everyone could now see had always been there. The clumsy stumbling had been an act. Jake Morrison stepped forward. Lisa, wait. I had no idea about your background. If I had known... Lisa turned back to face him. Would it have mattered? You watched them beat me up week after week and you thought it was good training. You told them to push me harder. The only difference is now you know I could have stopped it any time I wanted to. She sat down to put on her shoes while the entire class watched. Kyle and Ryan were still trying to process what had happened to them. They had gone from being the tough guys picking on a weak beginner to being embarrassed in front of everyone by someone they had underestimated completely. I came here looking for peace, Lisa said as she stood up. Instead, I found the same kind of bullying and violence I was trying to get away from. I guess some things never change. She walked toward the door, then stopped and looked back at Kyle and Ryan one more time. Next time you decide to pick on someone, remember that you never really know who you're dealing with. That quiet person you think is weak might be someone who's seen things you can't imagine. Lisa pushed open the door and stepped outside, leaving behind a room full of people who would never forget what they had just witnessed. The dojo remained silent for several minutes after Lisa left. Students stood around looking at each other, trying to process what they had just witnessed. Kyle Bennett sat on the floor holding his sore arm, while Ryan Clark leaned against the wall, still catching his breath from being thrown across the room. Jake Morrison was the first to speak. Everyone go home, he said quietly. Class is over. The advanced students began gathering their gear, but they moved slowly and kept glancing at Kyle and Ryan. Nobody knew what to say. The two black belts who had seemed so tough and confident just minutes before now looked small and embarrassed. As the students filed out, Jake heard them whispering to each other in the parking lot. Word about what had happened would spread quickly through the martial arts community. By tomorrow, everyone would know that two black belts from Mountain View Academy had been beaten by a woman they thought was just a beginner. Kyle finally stood up, his face red with anger and shame. "This is your fault," he said to Jake. "You should have told us she was military." "I didn't know," Jake replied. "Her application said she had no martial arts experience." "Well, she lied then," Ryan said, though his voice wasn't as confident. As usual. Jake shook his head. "No, she didn't lie. She said she had no martial arts experience, and that was probably true. What she had was combat experience. There's a big difference." Over the next few days, Jake couldn't stop thinking about what Lisa had said. He watched video recordings of her early classes, trying to see if he had missed any signs of her real abilities. Looking back, he could see small things that should have told him Lisa was different. The way she moved was too controlled for a real beginner. Her balance was too good, and she never seemed truly afraid even when Kyle and Ryan were hurting her. Jake realized that Lisa had been acting the whole time. She had deliberately made herself look clumsy and weak because she really did want to start over as a beginner. She had been trying to learn karate the peaceful way, without using any of her military training. On Wednesday, Jake was surprised to see Lisa's car in the parking lot when he arrived at the dojo. She was sitting inside, just staring at the building. Jake walked over and tapped on her window. "Can we talk?" he asked when she rolled it down. Lisa looked tired. She had dark circles under her eyes like she hadn't been sleeping well. "I don't think there's anything to talk about," she said. "Please, just give me 5 minutes." Lisa thought for a moment, then got out of her car. They walked into the empty dojo together. In the bright afternoon light, the place looked different than it did during evening classes. More peaceful. "I owe you an apology," Jake said. "I should have stopped what Kyle and Ryan were doing to you. I thought I was helping you become tougher, but I was really just letting them bully you." Lisa nodded but didn't say anything. "I've been teaching martial arts for 15 years, Jake continued. "I thought I knew what real strength looked like, but you showed me something I'd never seen before." "What's that?" Lisa asked. "Real strength isn't about how hard you can hit or how many people you can beat up. It's about choosing not to use your power when you don't have to. You could have stopped Kyle and Ryan anytime you wanted, but you didn't. You took their abuse for weeks because you were trying to be peaceful." Lisa sat down on one of the benches along the wall. "I've hurt enough people in my life," she said quietly. "When I got out of the army, I promised myself I would try to find another way to live. I thought martial arts might help me learn discipline and control." "It can," Jake said, "but not the way I was teaching it. I let this place become about who was toughest instead of who was most disciplined." They sat in silence for a few minutes. Finally, Lisa spoke again. "What happened to Kyle and Ryan?" Jake's expression darkened. "I suspended them both for 2 weeks. When they come back, they'll start over as white belts. They need to learn what martial arts really means. And if they don't want to do that, then they can find somewhere else to train. I won't have bullies in my school anymore." Lisa looked around the dojo, remembering her first night there. "Other students have started asking questions, haven't they?" Jake nodded. "Word got out about what happened. Some people want to know if you're going to start teaching here. Others are asking why we didn't know about your background." "I never wanted to be a teacher again," Lisa said. "I spent years training soldiers to fight and kill. When I retired, I thought I was done with all that." "But you're not done with martial arts?" Lisa thought about this carefully. "I love the philosophy behind martial arts, the discipline, the respect, the idea of becoming better than you were yesterday. But I hate the violence. I've seen too much of what happens when people use fighting skills for the wrong reasons." Jake sat down next to her on the bench. "What if there was a way to teach martial arts without the violence? What if it was just about the discipline and respect you're talking about?" "Is that possible?" Lisa asked. "I think so. But I'd need help from someone who really understands what martial arts should be about. Someone who knows the difference between fighting and warrior spirit." Lisa was quiet for a long time. Outside, she could hear cars driving by and children playing in the park across the street. Normal, peaceful sounds that she had been trying to get back to since leaving the military. "I might be willing to try," she said finally. "But it would have to be completely different from what you were doing before. No more bullying. No more letting students hurt each other just to prove how tough they are." "Agreed," Jake said immediately. "And I want to start a special class for people like me. Veterans, police officers, people who have seen violence and want to find peace through martial arts, a place where they can practice without having to be aggressive." Jake smiled for the first time since Friday night. "I think that's exactly what this place needs." Over the next few weeks, word spread through the community about the changes at Mountain View Academy. Kyle and Ryan decided not to return when their suspension ended. Some other students left too, preferring to find schools where they could still act tough and pick on weaker students. But new students started coming, veterans who had heard about Lisa's special classes, older adults who wanted to learn martial arts for fitness and peace of mind, parents who wanted their children to learn real discipline and respect. Lisa started teaching 2 classes a week. Her style was completely different from what the dojo had seen before. She focused on meditation, breathing exercises, and slow, careful practice of techniques. Students learned to control their bodies and minds instead of just learning to hit things. The transformation wasn't easy. There were still students who wanted to prove how tough they were, and some parents complained that the classes weren't hardcore enough. But Jake supported Lisa's approach, and slowly the culture of the school began to change. 6 months later, Lisa was sitting in the dojo after her evening class, watching her students bow respectfully to each other as they left. These were people who had found what she had been looking for when she first walked through those doors, a way to practice martial arts that brought peace instead of violence. Jake came over and sat next to her. "Any regrets about staying?" Lisa thought about the question. She had found the peace she was looking for, but not in the way she had expected. Instead of hiding from her past, she had learned to use her experience to help others find their own path to peace. "No regrets," she said. "This is exactly where I'm supposed to be."